Hi.
Hi, Caroline. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I was going to go and get a cup of tea and my breakfast. Wait a second.
Yeah, don't worry.
Good morning.
Morning. Hi, Simon. Hi, Luke.
Hi.
Hi, morning.
How are we all today?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, not quite as good weather. I don't know about you guys, but here it's not that good weather.
Well, I'm in 33 degrees, yeah.
32 degrees.
33
Where's that?
in Malta.
Ah, bueno.
Yeah, I've got great clouds, no sunshine, but no rain, which is good.
Yeah, about the same here, really. Morning, Mark. How are you?
Morning, very well, thank you, Robin. Yeah, all
Morning,
good.
Mark.
How are your preparations? Are you open yet, or?
No, we're going to open on the 6th.
Yeah, I think a lot of places thinking they'll forget the weekend.
Absolutely, we didn't have any bookings at the weekend, so we thought we'd start from the 6th, and yeah, we've got bookings coming in at the moment, so yeah, it's not too bad.
It's good.
Morning, David.
Morning, everybody. How are you?
Morning, David. How's Ireland today?
It's not as wet or windy as yesterday, Robin. There's more bad weather on the way, but a bit of respite. All the pubs opened yesterday, so life is good. There is a God.
People can drown their sorrows as rather.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you can only have a pint if you buy a meal. So basically, a pint now costs you about 15 euros. And furthermore, you can only stay in a pub for 105 minutes in one sitting. And what's more, you can only actually socialize with your immediate family. So there's plenty of reasons there not to go to the pub.
So how do they handle the 105 minutes?
With great difficulty. I think the sort of the COVID police will be sort of hovering around your table, you know. But the fact is, I mean, in all honesty, you know, the experience will change greatly. You won't have the usual messiness you'd expect to find in a pub. It'll be a bit more like a restaurant environment. I don't know if that's good, but that's what we're looking into for the next couple of weeks anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Voted then.
Fun and games.
I can go to the zoo. Decent.
Hello, who's going to the zoo?
Oh. I didn't realise you could hear me. Sorry. That's so funny.
Good morning, Paige.
Morning, you okay?
Yeah.
I was asking rules about social distancing and how many is allowed in the office at any one time. Yeah.
Morning, Paul.
Morning, Paul.
Said camera off, didn't it?
Good morning.
How are we today?
Very well, thanks. And yourself?
Okay. It's a bit dull out there. How's it down there in Paynton?
Well, you wouldn't believe it. We've had rain for about 3 hours this morning. The sun's just beaming out there at the moment. So, yeah, can't crumble.
When are you planning on opening?
24th.
24th.
Yeah, it's the coaches that we've got booked in, and once we've just finished rearranging the dining room to get everybody in, everything's all set to go. The COVID risk assessments are all done. We've been ticked off to say that we're good to go. So, yeah.
So coaches are running then?
Yeah. Reduced
That's
capacity. I've got one coach company that's going to run 2 coaches down to me to bring the numbers that they're looking to bring down. And yeah, that's to be fair, from the start we've been keeping in contact with all the coach companies to see exactly what it is they're going to be doing, what it is that we can do, and then we just kept close contact with one another.
And no offence to the people, but are they which age sector are they likely to be?
The age sector that we like looking after, which is the semi-retired. They're obviously the more high risk group. We're
That's
looking at sort of 65 onwards. The typical coach age. But that's been our business for 30 years. And it's done extremely well.
No, but it's interesting to know that they are returning to work, as it were. I was worried that coach trips would be a thing of the past almost for at least until the end of the year. But I
think it's area dependent at the moment. Where Buckleys that come down to us from Doncaster, Yorkshire, they seem to be doing just fine. We do have a coach company that's meant to be coming down from Leicester, which after yesterday, I think we're going to have to relook at that and then maybe relook at selling their space. But it's nice to have a challenge, and these next few weeks are going to be a huge challenge. So I think it's one of those things we just have to wait and see once the operation's up and going, how we perform and how the customers feel.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's going to be a lot of the way forward in the next couple of months. Is just seeing how the customers feel and going with it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from what we've heard, there's a lot of people that really would like to get away on holiday, and then there are, to be fair, it is a small percentage, the limited few that really feel that they should still be staying at home. So what else can we do? We can't drag them away on holiday.
No. Morning, Barry.
Morning, Robin. How are we? How are you doing?
Okay.
Good to
How's
see
the weather up there?
It's better than it was yesterday. I can see further than the other side of the street this morning.
Yeah, well, we had thunder and lightning this time yesterday, but we're okay now, a bit clearer.
No tornado.
No, I know. I saw that picture. I didn't see it. I didn't see the tornado, but it's a bit weird.
the only tornadoes I used to see in Aberdeen were the ones from the RAF painted green and grey.
Oh, yeah. Well, this was a pretty dramatic photograph.
Morning, all.
Morning. Hi, Kevin.
Morning. Morning, Barry. How are you? Morning, Julian.
Good, thanks.
David.
Good morning. Good morning. Morning.
Hi, Robin. Morning, Kevin.
Hi.
Morning.
Morning. Morning, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Yeah, good.
Oh, morning, Martin. Didn't see you hiding down there in the corner.
Morning. I was pretending to be you until a minute ago, Kevin. So.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
There's a bit of an identity crisis going on there.
I know.
No, it's one Kevin Holland.
Seen Rob Levick appear.
Wouldn't be the first time, Kevin. Wouldn't be the
Oh,
first
well,
time.
it was a bit of a time now.
Right, we're up to 35 at the moment. I mean, there's
We're doing quite well.
but
Actually,
give a little bit.
We've got all our speakers, Robin. That's a good start.
Well,
I was sitting with 60 seconds to go for a networking event yesterday, and the host wasn't there. I was like, oh.
Yes, can I just remind people, if they're not actually wanted to say something, they can keep their mute on, just so we don't get any interference from sort of like other people outside the group.
Okay, that's 10 o'clock, Robin. I'm conscious of everybody's time, shall we?
Yeah, let's go with it. We've got 40. There's there'll probably be a few more joining.
A few more to join us.
But let's carry on.
Super. Thanks very much, Robin. Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to this morning's online hotel forum. Great to welcome so many familiar faces back, and quite a few newcomers who are joining us for the first time this morning as well. Margot McLennan's there, Tim Penter, and a few others that I don't quite recognise yet this morning. Very, very welcome, and thanks for joining us this morning. My name's Barry Clark from Dunedin Consultancy. I'm your host, unfortunately, for this morning. Happy to be with you. We've got a bumper packed agenda for you this morning. 3 key speakers. We're going to be hearing from Robin Williams, looking at cost control in a post-COVID world. We're going to be hopping over the Irish Sea to join David Collins across in the west coast of Ireland to give us an update on. David will be giving us an update on booking trends, and can also give us a bit of an update on an open hospitality market 24 hours in. With the Republic of Ireland having opened the doors yesterday. Luke Martin's going to be giving us an update on risk assessment, something that hopefully is, and if it's not, it should be forefront in your mind at the moment before you pre-open. And then we'll wrap up with just a few other mentions, introducing 1 or 2 newcomers in the group, and picking up on 1 or 2 pertinent points before we close. And I'll be hoping to close the meeting about 11:10, very mindful of everybody's busy time at the moment. So in our customary fashion, we're going to start off this morning with just a brief State of the Nations review, see where we're at as a country, where we're at as an industry, and just to pick up on some of the particularly salient points right now. Probably best, let's start south of the border. I'm speaking to you from Glasgow this morning. We'll start south of the border in England. The excitement over the last couple of weeks since we last met was the confirmation of 4th of July as an opening for English operators in the hospitality industry, and also the move from 2 meters social distancing to 1 meter plus. I guess that's all been...
I'm not sure for the first people to hear the May data, but Michael is going to give us some...
Okay, sorry, had a bit of feedback there. The move from 2 meters to 1 meter plus, but I guess that all has been superseded somewhat with events in the last 24 hours. We've got 1 or 2 people from the Midlands who are with us today, but as you probably have seen in the news either last night or this morning, local lockdown, the first local regional lockdown has been implemented overnight, excuse me, in Leicester, which will have a number of impacts. Catching up on the media this morning, all non-essential retail in Leicester has been instructed to remain closed today. Schools will be closing as of Thursday, and particularly relevant to ourselves, hospitality operators who were expecting to open this weekend have now been instructed that they will not be able to do so. The latest development I heard this morning is that that situation in Leicester is going to continue for at least 2 weeks. It will be 2 weeks before that situation is reviewed. I think that gives us a bit of a taster in terms of what may happen as we move forward, where these localised regional or city-based lockdowns will be the favoured situation moving forward, rather than hopefully, touch wood, a national lockdown situation. So it'll be interesting to see what develops over the next couple of weeks in that locality. The one thing that I did pick up on this morning that was a little bit concerning, there's actually not a clear definition as yet in terms of how far those restrictions apply. The official word that I could pick up this morning from media was that it's Leicester and surrounding areas, but there was a qualification from the Department of Health there that they will publish later. Didn't actually say later today, but it said they would publish imminently the surrounding areas of Leicester that the situation would also apply to. So it's not just the city. And the key message there is don't travel into Leicester, don't travel out of Leicester, and if you're within the area, don't travel within. So it's quite a significant development. Other than that, the rest of England seems to be in a fairly positive position that they'll be able to open the doors for business as of Saturday, this coming weekend. Swiftly jumping north of the border, up here in Scotland, slightly different situation. We are a couple of weeks behind England in terms of developments. Probably a fair assessment, given that we were a couple of weeks behind, particularly London and the big conurbations in England, in terms of the impact of coronavirus and COVID to begin with. In Scotland, the good news that we've had, 6th of July, so Monday of next week, outdoor beer gardens, as it's been defined, are able to open for business. And then the main date for us north of the border is 15th of July, where hotel accommodation and indoor restaurants, bars, cafes can reopen subject to social distancing measures. Self-catering accommodation, we are, within Scotland, we currently have a loosely defined 5-mile travel restriction. That's being lifted as of Friday of this week. So after Friday, north of the border, we are pretty much allowed to travel freely, but we've still been encouraged not to make unnecessary journeys. So I think there'll be a lot of travel around north of the border to visit families and such this weekend. That also does mean that self-catering accommodation is able to reopen as of this weekend north of the border. As yet, we're still being asked to maintain a 2-metre social distancing measure north of the border. Across the Irish Sea, slightly different situation between the north of Ireland and the Republic to the south. David Collins can give us an update very shortly in terms of what's happening in the Republic, but they were ahead of the game, and hospitality businesses reopened yesterday, or were able to reopen the doors yesterday. In Northern Ireland, north of the border, from Friday of this week is the opportunity to reopen doors. The one place that I couldn't really get a feel for things was Wales. Seems to be a bit of an unclear situation in Wales. Are they following the English lead, or is the Assembly in Cardiff implementing their own regulations in that respect? And perhaps later on in the forum, if there's anyone that's in the borderlands between England and Wales, you can maybe give us an update there as to what the situation is. A couple of other quick things I wanted to pick up on this morning before we go into our guest speakers. One of the things that's become apparent over the last few days, and I think something that from conversations I've been having with hospitality business owners, something that's a little bit of a surprise, it's become very clear that as hospitality businesses, whether that's pubs, cafes, restaurants, hotels, we're now going to be placed at the forefront of the health track and trace system. And within the coronavirus control measures, there is an expectation that as hospitality business owners, you'll be gathering data regarding who's coming into your business. And there's an expectation, a requirement for you to retain that data for up to 21 days so that it's accessible to the health authorities should there be a localised outbreak in your area. Now, gathering customer data, certainly for those of us in the hotel industry, isn't a particularly unusual thing. But the thing I really wanted to just highlight for everyone and just remind you, you may already be aware of this, but obviously in collecting data, that is going to have GDPR implications for you. And very important, I would suggest that you consider how are you going to collect that data. More importantly, how are you going to store securely that data. I've already heard of some anecdotal examples from elsewhere where that data has been collected and then has been misused. So just to pick up on one or two key dates there, hospitality business owners are going to be expected to support the track and trace efforts and keep that data for 21 days. Because you're collecting that data for the nature of the health track and trace system, that data is not yours to be using under any other circumstances. So resist the temptation to add that data onto any marketing lists that you have. You'll be in breach of GDPR if you do that. Also really important, you're going to have to keep that data secure. And I think in particular, what we need to be thinking about here is how are you going to gather that data in the first place? So just a couple of key points that I would suggest to you. What is the data that you need to gather in the first place? And don't overcomplicate things. Don't go gathering more details than you need to. It's names, it's contact details, addresses, phone numbers. And how are you going to collect that? I think ideally be thinking about something like Google Forms or Jotform, one of those kind of electronic devices. Because a sheet of paper with some boxes for name, address, phone number, it's not going to cut it. That's not going to be GDPR compliant. And more importantly, what happens when that sheet of paper goes missing? So the old-fashioned booking sheets that we used to have for restaurant lists and such, that's just not going to cut it. So something to really think about there. And once you've gathered that data, after the 21 days where it's no longer required, how do you intend to securely destroy that data so that it can't be misused? So some key things there just to think about. And the last point on that, the gathering and saving of data also applies to staff members who you're bringing back into your business. It's not just customers. The final thing that I just want to pick up before we go into the guest speakers is regarding social media and your presence on social media. Just before I came on here this morning, I was kind of sucked into a LinkedIn conversation. It was a bit like being dragged down the rabbit hole. And it just really struck me how tricky conversations that some people are having on social media at the moment is. So the thought I want to leave you with is, if you're out there on social media, particularly things like LinkedIn, and I'm sure you will be at the moment because you're wanting to communicate with your customers and your potential customers, remember why you're there. This particular conversation that I saw was got really quite heated about the media storm in the last couple of days about potentially the border between Scotland and England being closed as some form of quarantine from people travelling from England to Scotland. What's become quite apparent is this is a media storm that's been created by one of the weekend newspapers. The Scottish Government have come out and made a very clear statement that they have had no intention whatsoever of introducing any form of quarantine between England and Scotland. But some quite heated debates been going on in social media over the weekend. And I was quite surprised and in some instances shocked by some of what I was seeing on social media this morning. Professionals who are very clearly labelled as being on LinkedIn under their company and their professional banner, having quite personalised, quite opinionated and verging and getting into political stances of why the Scottish and English governments might be behaving in certain ways. It does themselves and their businesses no favours whatsoever. And actually reading through that and reading through some of the comments might well have an influence upon my decisions as to businesses that I would choose to work with and would choose to distance myself from in the future. So my message is, whilst you definitely want to be out there in social media communicating with everyone at the moment, just have a think about what you're saying and some of the debates that you're being dragged into. Doesn't do you or your business any favours to be getting into some quite personalised and potentially political and social debates right now. For there to be a discussion going on there about survival of the fittest, and if some people can't survive coronavirus, it's doing those individuals and those professionals no favours at all. So on that cheery thought, let's move on. We've got a packed agenda for you this morning. So first up, pleasure to introduce Robin Williams from Hotel Synergies. And this morning, Robin's going to be sharing his thoughts with us on the thorny topic of cost control, particularly in a post-coronavirus marketplace. Robin, thank you very much indeed.
Everybody, hope well. I'm going to share a PowerPoint. I'm afraid it's the best way for me to go through all the points in question. So, cost control for hotels. I have some basic guidelines I always stick to with cost control, and anybody who saw last time's presentation on revenue forecast will know that the number one is make sure you link your controls to a good revenue forecast. It's no good cost controlling to a budget when you aren't making those sales. So always bear that in mind, always to get a good revenue forecast in place, and from that you can grow your cost control around it for your variables. If you're not doing good cost control, concentrate on the big ones first of all: payroll, food cost. They're the ones that will make the big difference, and as you grow, you can get better cost control. Understand what you're controlling. I'll move on to that in a bit, but always there's different hotels have different ways their costs work, and it's always good to understand how your hotel works, which KPIs work for your business, and how they're affected by your business. Keep it simple and easy to use and understand. You want your whole team to be involved in cost control, not just taking orders. They need to be aware of what they can do to make sure that the costs are controlled and reduced within the business wherever possible. But I always emphasize it's control, not necessarily reduction. I see a lot of companies do a lot of damage to themselves by simply cutting costs willy-nilly without actually controlling how they're reducing those costs or why they're reducing those costs. And that's an important point. Try to use software wherever possible. These days, there are some very good programs out there that don't cost a lot of money. They're quite easily got a return on investment when it comes to actually being able to control your costs. So it's well worth looking around and getting into some of those software if you've not already got them. And where possible, your updates, especially on payroll, food cost, things like that, need to be up to on a daily. You can't hang around waiting for days to figure out whether you're doing a good business or not a good business. So moving on, obviously, like I said, the big one is payroll. And your payroll will normally split into some variable areas and some fixed areas. Try to have a good balance of fixed and variable so that your business doesn't have an overcharge on it during the low months. You'll probably find room cleaners and public areas can be on a variable across the year. Same with serving and chefs, KPs. I think a lot of businesses get into trouble in the winter time when their kitchen is too much towards the fixed cost level. It has to be a good mix of your permanent chefs who you can rely on, and then a variable team that can come in when you actually need them. Things like spas and things, make sure that you've got a good booking system with something like a spa, and make sure you're paying them a commission for their sales, particularly retail, possibly services, because that's how they will grow your revenue to compensate for any lulls in the business. And by having a good booking system, you'll know when you need people in or not. Moving on, so variable payroll, room cleaners, you should be guiding your room cost by cost per room. It doesn't matter how much revenue you're getting that room, it's going to cost you the same to clean it. And with COVID, there's a tendency, they're saying people will not expect to have a room serviced during their stay, but they will expect to have it a very good clean after they've departed, so that the next people come along are there. So we're hoping that the costs will kind of wear themselves out. Public areas, you're looking at a higher cost here you need to be concentrating on that public area cleaning as we move through the next couple of months, because people will be conscious of it, and you need to make sure that the team are being productive. Some may consider it a fixed cost. Some may want to consider it as like a cost per meter squared, depending on what they clean each day. But make sure that your guys are being actually productive, and you know what they're cleaning, and you're checking what they're cleaning, and just to make sure that you're sort of like, you don't get a lull in there. Serving team, obviously, I always make sure that my managers are guiding their serving team rotas by cover, but also by percentage of F&B sales. Some companies go into a big complicated calculation of how many covers, how many raters, and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, if you have a lull one day, you will want to compensate for that when you've got a busy period, so that at the end of a week, you're coming in on percentage sales. Going back to what Barry has just said, one of the ways which will assist with actually collecting this data of who was in your establishment at the time will be the apps. And there is a growing tendency now in the next couple of weeks to install an app to do your ordering. That will reduce your waiter costs, but also it will give you that data that you have to collect, and it will be in a secure GDPR environment. So your guys will still have chance to impress the client with friendliness, with good service, and all the rest of it. But something like an app to take away that that part of the business will help to keep costs down. If you've got a bar team as a separate entity, as it were, make sure you're judging them on revenue per hour worked. That way they will understand that their main aim is to get revenue in there at all times. And with your kitchen, again, I always judge my kitchen cost per cover and also percentage of food sales. It's no good having a kitchen full of chefs when you're actually only doing beverage sales. Often I've seen businesses, they've got a great F&B business, but they assume that means they have to have a kitchen full of chefs, and that's where they tend to go wrong. So on the fixed payroll side of things, both within the departments and within the unallocated, make sure your managers are managing. Don't get them into the habit of just being overpaid waiters. They're there because they have a skill that is beyond the normal waiter. They're there because their ability to give guest service better than your normal waiter maybe. They're there because they need to be forecasting their revenue. They need to be thinking of sales ideas. They need to be thinking how to control the costs and working with their team to control those costs. They need to be training those team members, not actually doing the job for them. Another interesting one, take advantage of quality, not quantity. I know when I was working in individual hotels, I spent quite a bit of time setting up the controls and all the processes and everything that I've been talking about previously. But then once that was all done, I'd probably spend only about 30% of my time actually doing financial control. The rest of the time, I was probably being a slightly overpaid administration person, basically because they had me there. They had to make sure I worked. So bear that in mind. These days, there are a lot of professionals out there who will charge you a reasonable amount, which is nowhere near what you're paying for a full-time employee, to actually control your finance, to control your sales and marketing, to control your human resources. And then you can concentrate the admin work on admin staff, which will highly reduce your fixed costs. And it will give you the benefit of somebody who perhaps you didn't think you could afford for those positions. Keep an eye on repairs and maintenance. It's very good to have a team who understand your business. Some hotels rely on the fact that they have people there who've been there for a long time, but always bear in mind whether having that full-time team or the size of full-time team can be is compensated, or whether you should actually have perhaps rely on a few more contractors. If you get a good contractor, they'll still understand your business. They'll still work with you as a partner. It's just you won't be paying them full time. Systems of control for payroll. So obviously, you can do a basic control on your hours versus sales with any Excel spreadsheet. However, these days, when you take into account the price of decent payroll systems, there is really no reason why you shouldn't have one. I know of free systems out there that work very well with the hotel industry, and not only are they worth very well, they supply you with the full HR admin package. So they make sure that when you're employing somebody, you're taking account of all the permits they need, etc. They are GDPR compliant. You have not got files sitting around in a drawer that somebody could take and look on. And that is very important in this modern day. Most of these systems will allow you to import your revenue, forecast and actual into your rota scheduling so that your managers can see it every day, up-to-date figures on where they are, and make sure that they're controlling that cost regularly. These systems also have payroll admin, which means that you don't have to worry about your payroll clerk being off sick. You don't have that necessary fixed cost of somebody on the team, and they are specialists in payroll, so they will back you up when you need backup as far as payroll is concerned. Some of these actually have recruitment tools which will help you recruit your staff, control adverts, control CVs, etc., etc. And a lot of them either have a training module in them or have a link to a training software. And these days that's very important, because health and safety, all these trainings that you have to do on a regular basis to make sure that your staff are up to date on hygiene, etc., etc. If you have a system which does it and tells them automatically when they're due to a renewal, tells you who's been doing it, who's not been doing it, it just makes the whole administration of your personnel a lot more fluid and a lot more efficient. And then, like I say, if you've got somebody who's just an expert on call when you need them, you've got a great HR function there without having such an expense. Multi-skilling. This is going to be key to the next couple of months, and it should be key anyway in your business. If you are multi-skilling, you can utilize your team members higher. That means at the moment, you don't have to bring everybody off furlough. You just possibly bring in teams and swap the teams around and have the rest of them on furlough, which will save you money. Plus, having people who are multi-skilled gives them a better awareness of the rest of what's going on in the business. Waiters who work in the kitchen on an odd time, or chefs that actually do waitering, will give a whole new outlook to what they see, and it's good for the cohesion of the team. And in this moment, creating these small bubbles of multi-skilled team members could help if you have an issue with COVID, whereby you can just take a small group of people out of a business and then put another group in to take their place and still maintain the business running, which could be key in the next couple of months. So now, next one. The next biggie is obviously food cost control. Everybody should be reviewing their menus regularly, but they should have all reviewed their menus now, ready for reopening. You need to be looking for at the moment, you need to be looking for a slightly more restricted menu that will give you good GPs and will be easy to serve and easy to cook based on all the complications that COVID is bringing in. With food costs, secure storage is a necessity. It's not about assuming people might be ripping you off. It's about making sure you don't give them the temptation. Unfortunately, these days, a lot of people are in a lot of trouble out there. They're perhaps not earning what they expect to be earning, and it's not their fault. So don't make it easy for them to be stealing from them. I'm a big advocate of controlling allowances. I believe that if most point of sale systems these days will allow you to log your everything through the system and discount off certain items with different categories. So for example, entertaining by management or sales, staff feeding, the fruit that goes to the bar, anything like chocolates that go in prepared to go into the rooms, all these sorts of things. If you take a note of those things and then allow off the cost from your food cost, charging it to where it should really be going, sales and marketing, welfare, it will take away some of the excuses that your chef has as to why he's not made his food cost. You know, I've always seen this wrangle in hotels where, oh no, I can't make my food costs because I'm giving too much to the staff, or people keep giving stuff away. If you have a full control over every single thing that goes out that service, which isn't paid for, then that excuse just goes out the window. And not just those items which can be allowed off. If you're logging how much you're allowing off for complaints, for lost revenue, somebody walks out, wastage or promotions, but it just helps you to see where your business is going, and possibly you'll be surprised at the amount that's actually going out the door, which you aren't actually charging for. So always take those allowances into account, and always do the correct accountancy for those ones that can be charged out. As far as the day-to-day purchase is concerned, I always use a fixed stock with a shopping basket. If you agree with a chef, a fixed stock, which is basically the necessities of working, salt, flour, etc., and perhaps 1 or 2 days production, and say, right, that is your fixed stock, and say from now on, whatever you buy goes on your cost of sales for the end of month result. It just makes it so much clearer what you're judging your chef on, and it makes so much clearer as a manager to know where your cost of sales is on a day-to-day basis throughout the month. You can be logging those purchases quite easily, and then comparing them to sales. You can even, if you pop your forecast in for the weekend, you can say, okay, chef, you're a bit over this week, but I can see that we're going to have good sales at the weekend. You're in line. We don't have an argument, yeah? And there's a lot of systems out there that will help you with this purchase control. I mean, I'm not advertising here, but the one I've found most useful is one called Procure Wizard. And the benefit of that is not only that it's cheap for you and cheap for your suppliers, but the suppliers do all the admin for you as far as like price changes. That you get a warning saying they've raised the price, do you agree with it? But all this putting on extra items, all that sort of thing is just an admin charge, which you don't really want to take on. So they give you the benefit of having your purchasing controlled, you have your menu engineering, which is up to date with current prices. You can even get it, if you want to take off the stock on an automatic basis based on your sales. I tend to find excessive with the food control, but what I do tend to do is I tend to take my major food items, your steaks, your lobster, etc., work out how much consumption I've had in a month, and work out what those venue items have sold, and just do a quick comparison to make sure that everything is sort of controlled and online. Yeah, but nothing has gone missing. Yeah, beverage cost, always review your prices regularly. Prices are always rising in the beverage, and you need to make sure that you're still charging the correct GPs. It may be a market issue as far as what your competitors are doing, but you can tweak certain prices to make sure you're not losing out. Again, take into account those account allowances. A biggie here might be something like a free bottle of wine with every 2 main courses, or a free bottle of wine in the room. These sort of promotions are done to bring in clients, yes, but if you're not accounting for how much that promotion is costing you, then A, you don't know, you're not doing a good return on investment analysis of those promotions, and B, you're not being able to check your liquor cost is correct all times. Here, I tend to sort of recommend, if you can do like a reducing inventory by sales with some system, it will give you clear, up-to-date figures of which items are, if there's any items that are missing. But if you don't have that, then it's worthwhile spending a little bit of money on an independent stock taker. Every month they'll come in, they'll do your stock take, they'll tell you what the situation is, they'll do all the grind of actually calculating your consumption against your sales, etc. And they have the specialist knowledge. And at the end of the day, it means you have integrity over what that result is. So there, in any variable department, not just the food and cost, try to use a purchase system. Try to control against forecast, good storage facilities. In rooms, your variables, your amenities, your cost per sleeper should be a control that you can maintain. Depending on how many sleepers, you will probably use more of those, teas and coffees, shampoos. But during COVID, you may find actually that that's somewhere you can save money and even possibly make money. The general principle tends to be a room will be clear of all excess items, and teas and coffees and things could be considered excess items. That means you could either make more money through room service teas and coffees being charged, or at least offering a pack with your tea and coffee tray from reception with a sealed pack of tea and coffee and charging for it. If people really want that service, then they're likely to pay for it. And a lot of people probably won't notice that it's missing. Cleaning supplies, be very careful with cleaning supplies over the next couple of months. You are going to have to do a lot of cleaning. And don't fall into the trap of thinking cheap is cost effective. I worked on a big project a while back. They were using a local supplier who, yeah, it was a cheap product. They thought they were doing well. But at the end of the day, we put in one of these named suppliers of chemicals with their dosification. And yeah, their bottle of liquid cost a lot more than the other supplier. But because it was being dosed and it was being dosed at the correct level, we ended up saving a third on our cleaning costs. So always be clear on that. It's not always a case of buy cheap. Laundry costs. I always guide my laundry cost per room to see how we're going each month. There will probably be fewer changes during this COVID situation, so you should be able to save some money on that area as well. And always control rejects and train staff to control those rejects. If it's not going on the bed, you shouldn't be paying for it. And if you are controlling it and you are sending back those rejects to the laundry, then it's highly likely they'll be more careful about what kind of material they supply to you. Yeah. And also, now the biggie, TA commission. Since the 2008 crisis, a lot of people have been very dependent and possibly abused by the OTAs. Now is your possibility to try and reestablish levels. If you are going to use the OTAs, then please be clear what benefit you're getting from using them. Don't just go out there for the sake of it, and don't get yourself in a price war. At the moment, that is not going to help your cost control, is not going to help your profit. Increase that activity on social media, keep it up, keep your web page up to date. And if you need to use a social media agency, you'll probably find you can find some very good suppliers out there who will do your social media, who will keep it up to date, and will probably cost you less than you were paying before on TA commissions. So bear that in mind. Shop around. I know there have been some suppliers out there who have been a little bit zealous on their charging, but there are also some good people out there who are giving decent fees. And get yourself a loyalty software. These days, even independent hotels have access to software for loyalty. Make sure you've got those vouchers in place. Make sure you're doing whatever you can to get those clients coming through the door without going to the OTAs and coming back again, because that will be what helps your profitability. Variable costs on F&B, disposables, where I usually calculate that on a cost per cover, and I'm talking about your catering, your foil, your napkins, your takeaway stuff. And these probably will increase over the next couple of months because there will be an inclination not to use linen, to use paper napkins. There will be an inclination to put stuff in packaging so that it's more safe. So just be careful on what you're spending. Don't think carefully about the use of every item. I've seen in the past people spend a lot of money on packaging and then realize it's not the right one, and then they've wasted that money. Again, cleaning supplies. You should be all checking your machines to make sure the dosification is working correctly before you open. There's nothing worse than the machine running at a high dosification or whatever, because you'll just be throwing money out. At the same time, it needs to be high enough to hit all those viruses so that you don't have an issue in the future. If you are using paper napkins, then that cost should be compensated by the fact that you're not going to have to pay laundry costs on linen. If you can do tables without tablecloths, even better. It just means it's easier to clean down, it's more safe, and you're not getting that linen cost. So you can make a lot of changes in the next couple of months that will actually improve your costs rather than and compensate for where you have to increase your cost. So bear those in mind. Fixed costs, yeah, so if you haven't got a register of your contracts, you need to make one. You need to be sure about when your contracts are renewing, and you need to be clear before they renew whether you're actually getting value for money. You don't get stuck into one of these contracts which is auto-renewing with an increase every year and just get complacent about it. Every contract should be reviewed every time it's up. And if you do decide you want to look around, get at least 3 different quotes from people to make sure that you're not having the wool pulled over your eyes. If somebody is more expensive, why are they more expensive? And they need to sell that to you. They need to convince you that that's the reason. Utilities. I've always used a broker. Brokers have access to a lot more prices than you could ever have trying to negotiate with your usual supplier. And if you're sensible about it, make sure you consolidate any bills, make sure that all your energy gets renewed at exactly the same moment, because these brokers work on capacity. And the higher capacity they can show to a supplier, the better prices they're going to get. Which means also, if you can seek alliances with other hotels, go for it. If that broker can go to a supplier with 3 or 4 hotels, he'll get a better price for you than you on your own. And always bear that in mind. Insurances, make sure you pay for what you really need. Make sure you consolidate all insurances into one payment, because that will help your renewal charges. And again, use the brokers. At the end of the day, they get their money from the insurance company, and the insurance company will charge you the same anyway. So it's always worthwhile. Sales and marketing. All actions on sales and marketing, you should be able to see your return on investment. You should always look for a way to evaluate whether a marketing strategy has actually been effective. Yeah, there are lots of ways of doing it. That's why people have promotion codes. That's why I said earlier about evaluating how many bottles of wine you're giving away on a promotion. It's all about being able to turn around and say, well, actually, this has cost me so much, but I have gained so many sales. And every single time you do an activity on sales and marketing, you should be looking at what you've got from it, and that will help you to grow the correct strategies and discard those that actually don't make any money for you. Repairs and maintenance is a biggie in any hotel. Always keep separate analysis of your repairs and the contract costs, because that way you can constantly analyze and decide whether actually you'd be saving more money having a contract than you are just paying people every time they come in. A lot of money is wasted in repairs and maintenance with these constant one-off charges because they think it's cheaper, because they don't want to get into a contract. And then at the end of the day, that piece of machinery just breaks down, and they've not only got the constant repair cost, but they've got the cost of rebuying a new item. So a lot of the time, it's better to have somebody looking after that piece of equipment constantly, long term, because it will save you money when you get down to it. So in summary, look for purchasing systems, look for control systems where rely on these systems, because they will ease the burden administratively, and they will give you up-to-date information that will be valuable to ensure you're on the correct way. Keep a contracts register. Make sure your P&L includes all these data, includes all your KPIs, gives you a clear idea of what your variables are, so that you can move your business forward correctly. I always make a profit tracker. I basically, because I have my forecast here, I have my payroll reports here, I have my a purchase ledger. That's something I haven't mentioned. So all purchases that are not food should go through some sort of purchase order ledger. Even if it's as simple as a spreadsheet with numbers down the side and you put down your purchases at the side of it, you should be keeping control of what you're purchasing. It will not only help you to keep an eye on what you're spending on a monthly basis, but it will also help you to then build a profit tracker at the end of the month or during the month to see what your overall expenditure is concerned. And it will help your accounts team accrue for all those purchases, so that if the invoice hasn't come in, you don't suddenly have a shock 2 months down the line when you thought you were doing really well. Oh dear, here's an extra expense which I thought I'd taken into account, but it wasn't in the result. So always have some sort of purchase order tracking system. And from that, like I say, you can build a perfect profit tracker, and you'll know sort of on a regular weekly basis where you are. Try to keep it simple. Whenever I produce stuff, yes, it's there, but the administration of it is quite simple, because otherwise it's harder to keep it going, hard for people to understand it. It needs to be something that people can see straight away, they can learn from it, and they can work with it. And I think that's about it, really. Hopefully I'm not gone too quickly. Hopefully I've given some good advice that some of you will take into account. And back to you, Barry.
Robin, thanks very much indeed. Very detailed overview there, indeed. If anyone's got any questions, particularly for Robin in his presentation, perhaps you'd like to pop them in the chat box. Particularly for some of our newer visitors today, if you're not familiar with Zoom, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see right in the center a chat icon. Click on there, you can pop any questions for Robin in the chat box. Conscious of time, so let's move swiftly on. Pleasure as always to welcome David Collins, friend and colleague from across the Irish Sea in the west coast of Ireland. David's going to give us some thoughts this morning on current booking trends and give us a very brief update of what's been happening across in Ireland. David, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Barry, and good morning, everybody. I am going to share my screen here. However, I'm getting a message on screen.
Just a minute. I'm just making you...
Good man. Thanks very much, Robin.
There we go.
There we go. Fantastic. Okay. Can we all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, again, good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for the introduction, Barry. Thanks again, Robin, as well for that. My name is David Collins. Again, my company is Great National Hotels and Resorts. We work with about 130 hotels in the UK and in Ireland. We provide a range of services for those hotels, including marketing, revenue, and general management. And we do that through our company, Revenista, hence the name in the bottom right-hand corner. So we work with a number of different data partners, which we use to assist our clients. And what I've done this morning is compile together some of this data, at least generally, to show what's going on within the UK and the Irish markets. Now, it's very macro, quite short, it'll be about 8 minutes for the sake of timing this morning. Again, it'll be shared after this morning's session. Basically, what I'm going to look at very, very quickly will be, again, 4 areas: propensity, intent, actuals, projections. It'll become clear what I'm referring to in those sections once we go through the presentation. Start with the first one. Propensity is basically looking at how disposed people are to traveling. Again, specifically, I'm looking at the UK and Irish markets. We'll broaden it out towards the end of the presentation to look at the European market, but for the purpose of this, just now I'm going to focus specifically on the local markets, UK and Ireland. So if we take the first one, propensity, and that is people's, let's say, disposition to traveling. There are 2 charts here supplied by our first data partner, Avio. This is all current information, okay, and this tracks sentiment survey results over the course of the last 6 weeks. Approximately 2,500 people were surveyed over the course of 6 weeks. If you go to the first chart in the bottom 2 bars, you'll see that at the start of the survey round, there was a bit of sitting on the fence. People were sort of a bit ambivalent about whether they travel or don't travel domestically for 2020, but you can see in week 6 on the far right hand column that's a very defined pattern now, insofar as nearly 80% of people say that they will travel domestically this year, and just over 20% say they won't. It's curious that the opposite scenario seems to be the case in regards to travel abroad in 2020. And again, there's not a huge shift from when people started to be surveyed in week 1, but it's quite definitive now, 80% no and 20% yes. So just looking at the mix of the business effectively that's potentially coming our way, I won't dwell too much on this, but you can see in the first pie there is a preponderance, if you like, of family business, which again reflects the time of the year, summer holidays, kids out of school, etc., which is great. Lots of healthy revenue potentially in that pipeline. The age group likewise ranges from between 25 up to 45, again, highly mobile segment of demand, quite affluent as well. In terms of income, we're looking at, again, predominantly B and C1 demand, which again, you know, is pretty much where the type of demand that we want, because it's effectively the middle market, and the middle market is the one that it proves to be the most robust source of demand, certainly in my experience. So one of the two particular points there to take out of that is that compared to week 5 and week 6, there's been a significant jump in terms of active booking intent from 2% up to 33%, which is a dramatic shift in the right direction. Secondly, we also see from the statistics that there is a significant amount of latent demand, nearly 40%. That is people who are still waiting to book later in the year. And this is a very, very important point, because you know, that latent demand is pretty much playing a wait and see game in terms of seeing how hotels manage this new normal, inverted commas, but are also perhaps looking to avoid those higher volume times over the course of the next 8 weeks. And again, this is something that you should build into your marketing strategy. I spoke with some figures there about 2 weeks ago, possibly further, but the fact that, for example, people are taking longer to complete their booking, their bookings, for example, it's gone from 1 day within which somebody would take a decision to travel to 9 days now last month in May. The consideration phase has gone from 4 sessions to 8 sessions. So people are taking longer. But furthermore, the lead-in time to bookings has gone from, this is in January, 50 days to an average of 129 days. So people are taking longer, they're booking further in advance. And that's a significant opportunity for all of us in the room here, trying to target demand. You know, don't look at the next, necessarily the next 8 weeks. Look out towards the end of the year and plan your marketing and your budget spend on your marketing around that. We'll come back to that in a second. I think the interesting point here, looking at intent, so that's people's disposition to buy. Intent, a little quick generic search on Google, and this is, I can share this link, it's quite interesting link for people to look at, using the search term hotel breaks. Again, it's a very generic search term, but comparing that to self-catering and specifically looking at the Irish market. I'll come to the UK in a second, looking at the last 90 days, and you can see there's a significant spike in search traffic for the term hotel breaks as distinct from self-catering, which is obviously bubbling along the bottom. But hotels, which I found to be quite encouraging, are proven to be perhaps a more popular, certainly from a search point of view, solution for short breaks, family holidays. And again, this is the last 90 days. Looking at the UK, again, the same period, last 90 days, again, hotel breaks, self-catering, generic search terms. I think what this reflects here is obviously there's a clear jump in hotel breaks searches over the course of the last couple of weeks. I think if you look at the self-catering search graph though as well, that suggests that self-catering is a much more accepted, if you like, holiday type within the UK than perhaps in Ireland. And in fact, the demand within Ireland, I think, has been informed by the fact that people are more comfortable with the whole idea of social distancing. The reality is, of course, that there's limited amount of self-catering space in Ireland, and most of that is now booked. Just to put this in context, though, I compared those same search terms for the last 12 months, and the difference is quite dramatic. You'll see here that there's been a complete collapse, if you like, in searches for hotel breaks versus self-catering, which this again is the Irish market, which is bubbling along the bottom, if you like, and shows that it's not that exposed, if you like, to what we've seen in the hotel industry. And something similar then within the UK. Now, the UK is a couple of weeks behind, obviously, the Irish market, so that explains why you haven't seen such a dramatic increase in search activity for hotel breaks. But again, self-catering seems to be relatively unimpacted by what we're currently experiencing ourselves. Just regionally then, for the sake of completeness, comparing Hotels Scotland, Hotels England, Hotels Wales, Hotels Northern Ireland, you can see there in the blue curve, which is Scotland, it's proven to be a significantly more popular, if you like, a destination, certainly from the point of view of Hotel Scotland search term. This is again for the last 90 days, followed by England, followed by Wales, followed by Northern Ireland. So let's just give you, I suppose, a feel for what people are searching for. Just in terms of actuals, though, the reality is, however, is that within Ireland at least, projected hotel occupancies for the year 2020, it's going to be a cataclysmic collapse, if you like, in demand by the time we get to the end of the year. The average throughout 2019 was 73%, falling to about 32% by the end of the year. This has been reported this week. This is all current, and this is coming from a number of different sources, and we're seeing this on the ground ourselves as well in terms of demand. Looking at the next 3 months, for example, July, August, September, into October, actually, you've got 3 key markets there: Cork, Limerick, Galway, throughout Ireland. All 3 popular destinations, lots of quality stock. The average across the country is again very disappointing, 8% to 9% next month, through to a high of 21% in September, reflecting possibly an increase in corporate demand, falling back then to 18% in October. So those are fairly depressing projections. This is from trending.ie, which is another partner of ours. What I found very interesting, though, is the fact that when I went on to look at similar reports in the UK, I couldn't find any. This is the homepage from the caterer yesterday. You would have expected a screaming headline there about concerns in regards to hotel occupancies for the coming year, or at least for the coming season. I couldn't find anything, and it just struck me that perhaps, certainly the caterer's case, they might be in denial. Looking at further afield, in particular, a much wider picture across the European market, this is from STR. another one of our data partners. And again, as we might expect, the current crisis is likely to be more severe and take longer to recover than the global financial crash. You've got 3 different scenarios there. And effectively what they're saying is basically it's going to take through to 2024 before we see anything like a return to 2019 levels. I won't go through all the content on that, but this is a quick graph to show you how, for example, ADR is likely to recover over the course of the next 4 years, and it's going to take a year longer to get back to where we were pre-COVID as far as STR are concerned. What these people do is they take aggregate sort of statistics across a huge basket of hotels throughout the UK, Ireland, and Europe. So it's pretty accurate. Also quite. So finally then, what can we do? And I didn't want to end too much on a low note. There are things we can do as individual operators. Robin's actually touched on 1 or 2 of those. They're all there. You know, realign your marketing and your revenue strategy for the current scenario. Be prepared to review it on an ongoing basis. You know, prepare your website, optimize your digital assets. We have one hotel, for example, which is having a storming start to the season. Or restart of the season, I should say. 4-star hotel, 65 rooms, is currently achieving 100 to 1 of a return on its PPC. Its revenue, for example, for the month of July is currently running at 4 times what they achieved last year in 2019 for the same month. So there is business to be had there. It probably reflects the fact that some hotels aren't reopening perhaps till next week or the week after, or more importantly, haven't used this downtime we've all come through to do a lot of spring cleaning, if you like, within their digital ecosystem. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit there. And even at the best of times, we'd always maintain that there's at least 25% latent demand, latent revenue within a hotel's business. It's just a question of pushing the right buttons and tapping into that latent demand. In terms of cancellation policy, I think it's important that we do implement a flexible cancellation policy, because that is of some reassurance to people booking. There is likely to be a second wave. Here in Ireland, for example, our chief medical officer is now insisting that people do not travel abroad because of the real threat. You know, to provide reassurance to people to book those short breaks, family holidays domestically. Cancellation policies will be key. Robin mentioned your channel mix, very important, so that you're not over dependent on your indirect OTAs, your indirect channels, which tend to be of a much higher cost of sale. Look at what your competitors are doing, and don't necessarily track what your competitor is down the road. If you're a resort destination hotel, your competitive set could be 20, 30 miles away, possibly further. Again, Robin mentioned CRM, very, very important. You know, now more than ever, it's vitally important that you hold on to your existing customers, much lower cost of acquisition. Analyze the numbers. You know, this comes on to the final point. We have rolling forecasts in our own business, and that's group wide within the hotels. Likewise, we update our forecasts you know, twice weekly. And it's so important that ultimately, whatever about the emotion behind this calamity we all find ourselves in, you got to bring it back down to the numbers and be guided by those. That's it. Thanks.
David, thank you very much indeed. As always, very detailed and very informative. If anyone has any direct questions for David, perhaps again, if you could pop them in the chat box, and we'll try to come to those at the end. Can I just remind everyone, while we're talking about chat, before you leave the meeting today, do take the opportunity to save your chat. There's a lot of contact details in there, a lot of information as well that you can pick up at your leisure. If you're not sure how to do that, if you look at the chat box on the right hand side of your screen, down in the bottom right hand corner, you'll see 3 little dots. Click on that and you should get the option to save chat. Unfortunately, anybody who's watching the forum on an iPad, you don't have the facility to do that on an iPad for some bizarre reason. But in most other devices, you'll see the 3 dots bottom right hand corner, and you can save the chat there. Great stuff. Moving swiftly on, folks, to the third of our guest speakers today. We're going to be turning to Luke Martin in a second, who's going to be giving us an update and a reminder in that thorny topic of risk assessing, but very, very important and pertinent one in these times. So Luke, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Can everybody see my screen? Moment. Okay, lovely. We'll make a start, and I'll try and keep this brief. So obviously we've all heard, certainly in the UK, around COVID secure, and I know there's similar talk in the Irish Republic, but I know they're further forwards than us. So essentially, what does COVID secure means? It means you need to do risk assessment. Now, everybody should do risk assessments as part of their day-to-day work. This isn't anything different to what you would normally do. The difference is you've got to focus on the key principles here. So what work or activity or situations may cause transmission of a virus within a hotel? Who could be at risk? How likely is it that someone could be exposed? Now, you can quantify this in terms of either hours of exposure or number of times they come into contact with customers. And then part of it is also acting to either remove the activity or situation, or, as is more likely within the hospitality industry, control the risk to your staff, visitors, and everybody else. So there are some legal requirements that come into this. If you don't complete a risk assessment and you have a problem, the HSE, or Health and Safety Executive, has made it very clear they will take enforcement action. And the enforcement action will be anything from specific advice through to issuing actual formal enforcement notices, and ultimately imprisonment of up to 2 years. They have updated all of their guidance on their website. There is more coming as the situation evolves. What we've seen locally in Swindon is we've actually seen a couple of businesses that have been shut down temporarily and told to close. We've one locally within Wiltshire has actually been closed permanently because of a number of serious breaches that have taken place. There are 2 types of risk assessment you need to consider with COVID. There's an individual worker risk assessment. Now, this may be new to some of you, this may not be new, but what they're saying in terms of COVID is there are some key groups that you need to carry out individual worker risk assessments. Now, these are BMAE staff. We've all seen in the news that they are potentially more at risk of exposure. There's this group of people which are classed as shielding. Now, if you have employees that have been on furlough because they've been advised to shield, the expectation is that when they come back to work, you should carry out a specific individual worker risk assessment. New and expectant mothers. So if you have staff that are pregnant or have given birth and are planning to come back into work, there are some areas you need to look at with those. And then staff with other long-term conditions, which I'll go into later on in the presentation. And then there's the corporate risk assessment. So this is the risk assessment of your organisation. Now notice the difference between terminology. For individual worker risk assessments, you should do them. But corporate risk assessments, you must do them. It is a legal requirement, and I can't stress that enough. For ease of, I've broken it into essentially what's the process we need to look at. So you need to look at your business operations. You need to set what is your risk appetite in terms of the risk to your business, your staff, other customers, as far as COVID is concerned. That needs to be done in terms of looking at the legal guidance. Now, there is separate guidance for England, Wales, and Scotland around social distancing. As Barry's already mentioned, Scotland, you still have to social distance by 2 meters. here south of the border, it's 1 metre, but that may actually change. So make sure you look at the right guidance, make sure you understand the guidance. Then it's about identifying your risks, looking at what is your inherent risk score. What do I mean by an inherent risk score? That is the risk to your business without any controls in place. So as it stands right here, right now, without all the additional controls, what is the overall risk likelihood of COVID being transmitted, people catching it, your cleaning procedures not working, you're not being you're serving of food and drink, what are the actual risks? And then you need to look at, okay, so what controls can I put in place? So for example, if we take food and beverage service, do you go for solely table service? Do you limit your menu? Do you go for, as Robin's highlighted, paper tablecloths, paper napkins, disposable cutlery? How far do you feel you need to go to mitigate risk to your business? And then after that, you rescore your risk, and you rescore your risk to say, okay, with all of these controls that I've put in place, how likely is this to happen within my business? And then after that, it's looking at, okay, so I've got a score. That score may or may not be within my risk appetite. What else can I do? So what other further mitigation opportunities can I put into place to manage that risk appropriately? Now, you hear quite a lot within risk management. They talk about treat, tolerate, transfer, or terminate as the outcomes for each of the risks. I'll go into those on the next slide. But essentially, after you've done phase 2, you need to write yourself an action plan. You need to look at, okay, so what changes do I still need to make to my business? By when? Are they changes that have to be in place before I open so that I'm compliant with the COVID secure guidance? Or are they longer term actions, longer term improvements that aren't key to me being able to reopen? Complete your action plan. And then the other key thing is publish your risk assessment. Make sure your staff know. Market it out on your social media. A lot of the pubs, hotels, restaurants down here have started putting big signs up outside to say, we are a safe entertainment space. We are a COVID safe pub. To actually get people coming back through the front door when they can open on 4th of July. So I think it's consider how you can do that for your business so that when guests arrive, they've got something there visual that greets them and instills that confidence. And then the last phase is the review phase. So you need to be reviewing risk assessments on a regular basis. You need to be updating them as you open. Things will change, processes will change. You may find new risks. You may find that certain other risks are not appropriate. So it's about that constant review process. Some key risk buckets. So this is just how you can kind of quantify the types of risks you need to look at. So you have your operational risks. So these are delivery-based risks from the day-to-day running of your hotel. You need to consider external risks as well. So third-party vendors, service providers. You also need to look at the political, social, and cultural factors. Now, we've all heard about what's happening in Leicester. All the hotels there have been told to close. They're not allowed to reopen. I do know from correspondence I've had directly from central government, there are about 15 or 16 other places in the UK that are on a watch list that, should the number of cases rise, will follow the same pattern as Leicester. And the government are committed to, as they've termed it, this whack-a-mole approach. So they will hit specific hotspots with these short-term, harder restrictions, lockdown, whatever you want to call it. So you need to consider from a risk basis, what's going to happen to me if I reopen and then 2 to 3 weeks later, I'm in one of these hotspots and I get told I need to close. What's the impact reputationally? What's the impact on the financial aspect, forecasting and everything else? Because these restrictions will come in with little notice. I mean, I think they had about 4 or 5 hours notice in Leicester that everything had to shut down. Risk scoring matrices. Everybody should use one. This is just an example. So you look at the severity. Now you need to define for your own business what is insignificant, what's minor, what's moderate, what's major. It will differ from hotel to hotel. Large, well-established chain hotels will have a higher appetite for failure, whereas for smaller independent operators, you may want to think about actually something that's catastrophic for me may be, but I lose 10% of my bookings because I've got to cancel a coach tour, for example, and I can't resell the space. And then probability, this is again just an indication based on best practice about the different criteria around what is possible, what's not possible, and how you can kind of quantify that. Oh, sorry. And then you need to look at mitigation options. This is where the treat, tolerate, transfer, or terminate comes into play. So to transfer a risk, what does that actually mean? That's essentially moving the impact away from your business. Now that may be via insurance or by getting in a third party to support you to remove that risk. So again, Robin's mentioned a couple like maintenance contractors, rather than having in-house, look at outsourcing that. It removes your financial risk of you've got to pay a lot of staff wages, again with the financial aspect, the HR aspect. If you can move those to external contractors, it removes a lot of your financial risk as you're trying to reopen. Tolerate, it's essentially you're saying, I'm going to accept the risk as it is. I can't really do much about it, or it's going to cost me too much to change. And this may be, for example, putting perspex screens on all your customer facing areas like reception desks. You may decide, well, actually, I'm going to go for PPE and ask customers to stand back a metre or 2 metres from a desk as an alternative. Treat, this is where you're actually going to put things in place. And then terminate is basically, I'm going to stop doing it. And I think the key thing with terminate is it's knowing when something basically can't be fixed and stopping what you're doing. And again, this kind of touches on, do I need all of my staff back in? Well, actually, no, I don't. I possibly need to look at, as Robin's mentioned, bringing bubbles of multi-skilled staff in as a short-term mitigation of certain elements of the staffing workforce risk. And then after you've finished, as I've said, make it visible. There is this poster, which is on the HSE website, which they are saying to people should be displayed in all establishments that have completed the 5 COVID secure steps, and it should be visible to customers as they come into the establishment. Now, obviously, that may change with the 1 metre apart, but keep checking the health and safety HSE website or relevant website if you live in one of the devolved administrations. Now to touch on staff risk assessments. So these should be completed for anybody on this list. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are the key people at risk from COVID should they contract it. Now, one of the things you may need to look at is the age. So essentially anybody who works in your business over 65 years, who's over 65 years of age, or who is over 50, if it's BAME staff, you should do a risk assessment for. Again, take consideration into, have you got the skills, the capacity to be able to do that yourself, or do you need to get some external HR support? And I know Kirsty Duck's on here from Face to Face HR. Talk to your HR people internally, or if you need external advice, can highly recommend Kirsty as to how to approach that. The last one is you also need to think about people who are carers, have caring responsibilities, may have newborn children in the family, or who may have elements of family stress, either with children not being at school yet or such like. So it's not just about medical. You also need to consider the mental health impact on your staff as you're coming back, and consider what is going on outside of the work environment. Now there's some legal guidance come out for England from the HSE. Barry, I'll look to you to see if anything's come out for Scotland. But essentially what they're saying is if you've been identified as a shielded worker, you cannot go back to work before the date's up on the slide. So you can't go back to work until after 31st of July if you live in Scotland, 1st of August in England, and 16th of August in Wales. Now I have heard they may be reviewing these dates depending on what happens with these isolated pockets of resurgence. So my message there is keep an eye on the website, but obviously just have these dates in mind, talk to your staff, engage with your staff. And the other piece of guidance is around new or expectant mothers. Essentially, legally, if you can't put appropriate control measures in place and you have staff that are pregnant or have just given birth, then they have a legal right to be put on paid leave, and you need to factor this into your individual risk assessments. And how do you identify the individual risks? So the easiest way to do it is to think about 3 key buckets. So direct contact with customers and staff. So reception, bar, restaurant, management, night staff. Indirect contact with customers, but direct contact with other staff. So that may be kitchen, housekeeping, back office functions, or no regular close contact with customers and other staff. And this is where your outdoor gardeners, maintenance staff, or the likes of come into play. And it's about flexibly looking at your approach to each of these staff that you need to do an individual risk assessment for. Which group do they fall in? What appropriate measures can you put into place for each of those staff groups? And some of the options questions you can ask are on the screen. One of the interesting ones that's come out is, has the individual got a vitamin D deficiency? Now, it's been proven if you have vitamin D deficiency, you're at a higher risk of contracting the virus should you come into contact with someone. But again, it's about managing that conversation with staff over all of these options. Can work be done from home? Can you move them elsewhere? Can we do alternative work for a period of time? Or have you got a way of limiting their face-to-face interactions? So if you're a larger establishment and you've got an office they can work in, can they work in that office by themselves and limit who has day-to-day contact with them? PPE is going to be a big question around wearing your face masks inside the hotel. At the moment, that is, I think it's a follow the guidance that comes out from the government, but also make up your own decision based on your risk assessments. And that's it from me. Barry, thank you very much. I've tried to keep it as concise as I can, given the time constraints.
Luke, thank you very much indeed. A very timely reminder there of the importance of the risk assessment process. I know from my own days in operations, whenever the cheery chappie from health and safety or local council walked through the door, first question would often be, let me see your risk assessment. Moving forward, I think any issues, and it's inevitable there will be issues that arise out of COVID-19 as we reopen. The first question I think you can expect to be asked from any official walking through your front door is, well, let me see your COVID-19 risk assessment. So whilst it's not the most exciting thing for us to have to do, a very, very important document to have to hand. It's really going to form everything that you do moving forward. So folks, that's that's everything from our 3 key speakers. Picking up just on some of the comments that's been in the chat box this morning, very, very briefly, I'd just like to say hello to Margot McLennan, who's joined us this morning. Margot, very briefly, if you just want to introduce yourself, in particular, you're bringing our skill set to the forum this morning that we've not had represented beforehand. So maybe if you want to just say hello to everybody.
Yeah, good morning everyone. I'm delighted to join you all this morning, and thank you to everybody for those presentations. They were really good. I'm here to share my restructuring experience to help your businesses survive and thrive. As the restrictions are lifted and you plan to reopen your business, are there difficult discussions that need to be had with your creditors and how best to settle debts? Possibly creditors that you would like to continue working with, so you need to look after that relationship. The government's introduced some new measures to help save the economy, and this is where I have huge expertise. I have in my toolkit many processes that can help businesses get through this difficult period. So there's no one size fits all, but there is a range of solutions that should cover all scenarios. So if you're concerned about the level of debt in your business, I'd advise you to take professional advice, restructure, and try and save livelihoods. If you'd like a chat about the level of debt in your business, and I can help you, and I'd be delighted to hear from you. I mean, measuring success can take many forms. Financial stability is the obvious one, but we don't underestimate the impact that our intervention can have on mental health and well-being. My contact details are in the chat box. I'm offering a free options review to any business here today that's struggling financially. So if COVID's damaged your cash flow, you know where to go. Margot McLennan from McLennan Corporate.
Margot, thanks very much indeed. I know from my own support and consultancy work with business owners, with hoteliers and hotel owners, it's always so much better to have that conversation sooner rather than later. There's so many times that people approach me for help, and if only they'd done it a few months earlier, the outcome might have been different. Folks, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. It's been another busy and packed forum. I hope you've enjoyed this morning. You found our key speakers of interest and informative. That's all from me, folks. So great thank you from me. And I'll just very briefly hand back to Robin just to wrap things up and say our farewells. Oh, you're on mute, Rob. There we go.
So you take off the mute. Well, thank you very much for all attending. Like I say, if anybody wants any advice or anything, just feel free to contact any of the people who have given the presentation, including myself. As usual, I'll include the chat and various bits of supply information and other information in the summary later on. And we should be having another one on the 14th of July. So look forward to seeing people then.
Thanks very much.
Robin, thanks very much indeed. Thank you to all of you for joining us this morning. Hope to see you again at the next forum on the 14th. Keep safe, keep well. Those of you that are reopening the doors, let's hope you see some people coming through and some new customers coming to visit you. All the best for now. See you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye, Barry. Bye, Kevin.
Ciao.